So there is this little tiny website you might have heard of. It's called Steam. They do something called the hardware survey, where they survey everyone's systems who uses the site if you consent. They gather any data from your CPU, your GPU, if you're running a hard drive or an SSD, anything like that. And according to Steam and Steam users, which is a lot of users, there is one graphics card that is now the most popular in the world, the GTX 1650. There's a few reasons for this. It's modern enough. It's cheap. It was coming in a lot of pre-built systems for a while. You can get them secondhand really easily. And so the GTX 1650 is a 4GB card from a few years ago now. But I want to know, is it actually any good? Especially considering that it beat out the 1060, which looking purely at paper, it's technically worse than. And so what I did was I went and bought a GTX 1650. Not only did I buy a GTX 1650, but to show the masses and show the general populace, I bought an OEM GTX 1650. I got this on Marketplace for 70 AUD dollars. 4GB card, of course. It was from an Acer pre-built and has no clear branding on it because it's OEM, original equipment manufacturer. It was made quick and dirty and cheap, just to be made for lots of pre-builts and put out in bulk. It of course still does have a brand if you check the serial numbers on the back. A lot of these link back to Zotac, but I want to chuck it in a system and see how it goes. Can it actually properly run games, and should you be buying it? Well, first let's look at some specs. This card is of course a single fan card. The reason it says don't touch is because fan currents, if you spin it, it generates a little bit of electricity which can go back into the board. That's generally pretty rare. It's a 4GB card, of course, single fan. Because it's OEM, it's got less inputs than normal, no display port. It's only got HDMI as well as DVI and a bare back. And so I need a system to test it on. But most of my test systems are either on par with it or lower than it. I don't want something that this is going to be bottlenecked on. And so I'm going to use a machine that's pretty powerful. This is my main rig, a Ryzen 7 5800X, an RTX 4060 Ti, 64 gigs of 3600 megahertz DDR4 RAM, a 2TB Samsung 990 Pro SSD, as well as just some other SSDs and hard drives I've slapped in there over time, and is overall a very good and powerful system. And this is way overkill for this card to give it the best chance it has. And just for a comparison, I'm going to really quickly run some benchmarks for this machine. Just benchmarking the 4060 Ti in the configuration, just to give some relative numbers to compare the GTX 1650 against later. I ran Time Spy, in which the graphics score, which is the important one in this case, was about 11,400. I ran the original Doom on Steam, which it got about 250 FPS. Portal 2 got about 300 FPS. Assassin's Creed Unity got about 130. Titanfall 2 averaged about 150. And Sea of Thieves averaged at about 230. That leaves us with the GTX 1650. What I'm going to do is pop out my RTX 4060 Ti, chuck this in, and let's see how it goes. And with that, I have my RTX 4060 Ti out. It's a dual by Asus. It is a very nice card, if I do say so myself. But I'm now going to be slapping in this. Oh, that was not a fun sound when it went in, but it's in. I'm not going to worry about attaching it too much because I'm literally just keeping it in there for testing. But I can only plug in one monitor because this second one is DisplayPort, and so I'm going to turn on the machine and hope it works. The machine still boots. The fan is spinning. Hey, it does boot. And there we go. Obviously, card is in the machine, and Task Manager clearly picking it up. I'm going to make sure I've got up-to-date drivers, and then let's give this card some testing. A good thing to be transparent about, while I am screen recording on the machine itself, I am using a software encoder on Streamlabs, not hardware. So the graphics card should be unaffected. So I ran 3D Mark on the GTX 1650. Again, just Time Spy, and the result turned out much lower than the RTX 4060 Ti. The score was a 2,526. I then of course ran games, and to be expected, the original Doom got about 250 FPS, which is pretty much limited by the engine. I pretty much just run that to check, hey, is this half decent at all? Portal 2 ran a bit lower at closer to 250 FPS as an average. But as I tried to run Assassin's Creed, I noticed the temperature was getting really high and noticed a bit of an issue on the card. So I've got the card plugged in, and the fan is clearly getting power, but she don't want to spin. It's letting me run games and stuff, but it's getting buggy. I'm going to try restarting the system. Okay, I've got it back up and operational. She's not running too smoothly, but she'll run smoothly enough. It just kind of boils down to the GPU fan is not on its way out, bad bearing or motor or something, but she should be operational long enough to finish testing. I then finished the testing with Assassin's Creed, getting about 40 FPS average. Titanfall 2 only got about 60 FPS. And of course, Sea of Thieves only got about 100 FPS average. With that, mission is accomplished, and I've already put my RTX 4060 Ti back in. I'm going to put the glass back on in a second, but let's talk about the GeForce GTX. Whoop, I dropped it. So, this card. It's a cheap card. It makes sense why it's the top, but it's by no means a great card. It's good enough to get the job done. It's good enough to run most games, at least on low settings, but it's not the kind of thing that you're going to try and run Cyberpunk high settings on. It's okay. It's not a bad gaming card, and it's good for a budget option, but honestly, just for a little bit higher, you can get things secondhand like a GTX 1660, or even a lot of AMD cards. And so, this card is not by any means a bad card. I don't see a lot of reasons to buy it. Especially because this one, the fan's already died on me. I haven't had this card very long, and the fan bearing is gone. Oh well. For the specs of the card, look, it's okay. It'll run most things adequately. But for context, this flattened it, and it's not even that much faster than a 1050 Ti. So, my honest advice, if you're looking for a budget card, is to just, if you have the option, save up a bit more and get something like a 1660 or 1660 Super and avoid the 1650s. Not a bad card, but not the greatest. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video about the GTX 1650. I think it's a really interesting card, and it's a very common budget card, of course. So it was interesting to have a look at. But in 2023, it just does not hold up as well as it used to. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm a small channel and help out a ton. I'd really appreciate it. We're nearly at 2K. Comment down whatever graphics card you're running. I'm curious. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.